Perhaps Kurt Weill's most famous work is a piece he wrote originally in 1928 called Die Drei Groschen Oper, which again, if you talk about how Germans tend to crunch a bunch of words together to make a big long word, that means that is the Threepenny Opera. The notion that opera had to be so cheap that a beggar could afford it, but so wonderful that it would be the great thing that a beggar would imagine if asked to imagine the most beautiful thing he could think of. That was sort of the nature behind this piece. And the Threepenny Opera originally began in the 1920s. It is an adaptation of a much older play by John Gay called The Beggar's Opera, which was a British piece. And it's set in Britain, actually, even though it's kind of a German piece, and it has a big revival with a lot of success in America. The Threepenny Opera gives us probably Kurt Weill's biggest hit song, which is funny because I think if you were to ask Kurt Weill what would be the biggest antithesis to everything he stood for, it would be the notion of having a hit commercial song. But he did have this one. The Threepenny Opera opens with an overture. That's probably something else I'm going to connect you with in our our links underneath. You may hear strains that remind you perhaps of Danny Elfman's work for Tim Burton's films, that remind you of a sort of a cockeyed, almost gothic artistic sensibility. That's really the sound that Weill was going for there, and a lot of subsequent composers have said that he was a big influence for them. Threepenny Opera is not at all a pretty story. In fact, again, in this desire to kind of tell life like it is, and all the themes that these guys are so fond of, there's a lot of bitter irony in this piece. It's primarily about a serial killer, a man named Mac Heath, also known as Mac the Knife. And Mac Heath is very charming in that he wears white gloves. He's very clean about killing people, probably prostitutes, and that he brags about the fact that he doesn't spill very much blood, he does it quickly and it's over with, and he's such a gentleman for doing that. His main squeeze in the piece is a young girl named Polly Peachum. Polly lives with her family, her parents, and the Peachums work for a company that they run. Now this is the height in political satire and irony. The Peachums run a company for beggars, and the idea is this: that if a beggar on the street is looking for a handout, that person has to look sufficiently terrible, or else they won't make good money. If they're not getting good handout contributions, they go back to the Peachums and they give them a more beat up coat, maybe beat them up a little bit, maybe give them some makeup, rough up their hair, and they say, okay, now you look like hell, now you should make a lot of money. Probably not as much as that lucky person with one arm, he makes a bundle, but I mean, you could probably make some looking like this. And the Peachums have what they consider a respectable business. They don't necessarily want their girl marrying a guy who has a habit for killing people, however charming he may be. And through a lot of machinations, Mac is eventually, at one point, captured. He's freed at the end of the piece, just to give you an idea of that, because it's, well, first of all, people are looking forward to his execution. They say, wow, this is going to be great, we can sell souvenirs, we haven't had a good hanging in years, it's going to be exciting. Unfortunately, it's also the same date or around the same time as a Jubilee anniversary parade for the Queen, and rather than be upstaged, she pardons him. And some characters are even outraged, including Mac, that he's being pardoned for this reason, and he wants to be the big piece of attention. Probably the most famous song from the show is a song called Mac the Knife. And the interesting thing about this, I'm going to give you two different versions of this song together with our notes in this module. The first version of it is from the show. Interesting thing here, and it's very typically Kurt Weill and Burt Brecht. Mac the Knife is the first song you hear. It is sung by a character that you will never see again. He comes out just long enough to tell you that Mac the Knife is out and on the loose and to tell you what people have been hearing about him. The original title of the song was simply called The Song About Mac the Knife, and then he leaves. We never see him again. It's almost like Weill is going, all right, you want your hit song here? Good. Now, back to the message. The song, in an attempt to sort of indicate the day-to-day trap that these people find themselves in, is written without a bridge. In other words, the song maintains the same musical pattern without changing its melody. The shark has pearly teeth, dear, and he grows them pearly whites. Da, da, da. Now, sometimes it changes key, but it primarily, if you listen to it, it's the same song. And if this song annoys you, they would say, good, that's what we wanted to do. These guys also never met an accordion they didn't like, so you're gonna find an awful lot of that mixed into this song, its original version. Now, here's a side note, maybe more than a side note, maybe a separate story. The 1950s, particularly the late 1950s, there was a rock singer named Bobby Darin. And Bobby Darin had a lot of success in nightclubs. He was a successful actor. He was even nominated for an Oscar award. And he had a habit of, he had written and performed a number of hit rock tunes like Splish Splash and some other hit rock and roll songs in the 50s. And whenever he pressed an album, he would also, because he thought he would kind of bring kids into show tunes, he would sneak a show tune onto his rock albums. There are recordings of him singing the title song from Guys and Dolls, him singing a song called Artificial Flowers from the musical Tenderloin, and some other things. But probably his most famous was a decision to cover Mac the Knife from the Three Penny Opera. He manages to get past the notion that the song has no bridge by upping the orchestration, a little bit of a modulation of the key to just kind of pick it up and make it, and also the story that it tells itself is interesting enough. What he maybe did not expect was that audiences, particularly parents, discovered, hey, this song is about a guy killing people and not shedding any blood, and about all these prostitutes that he's knocked off. This should be banned. Well, Columbia Records already had an obligation to release the song, and the best thing that they could come up with was to put advertisements in newspapers warning people that this potentially offensive song would be played on major radio stations at certain times of the day, which only led to the song selling millions. It became the biggest hit of 1959, and the only #1 single of Bobby Darin's career, and certainly the only #1 single written by Kurt Weill. And by the way, sad and weird note, Bobby Darin was convinced all his life that he would not live very long. He was right. He died in his 40s. The man who recorded Mac the Knife died on the operating table. There's some dark humor in that. In any case, Mac the Knife became a huge jazz and rock standard, and I'm sure that version of it you will have heard, but it's certainly not the style that it was originally written in, and it's certainly not being done for the purpose that the authors originally wanted it to be done. Weill would wind up working on other musicals and did eventually pick up enough English that he would write musicals specifically to be written in English. He wrote a piece called Lady in the Dark, which was about a woman's exploration of the world of psychoanalysis, and talked about this person going in under hypnosis and that sort of thing. And perhaps some of the weirder things about that were that early set designs for it were done by an artist named Salvador Dali. In 1943, he wrote a piece called One Touch of Venus about a sculptor who falls in love with his statue, and the statue comes to life. It has another very popular jazz standard in it you may have heard called Speak Low. In general, Kurt Weill, thanks in part to Mark Blitzstein writing new lyrics and then eventually teaming with other lyricists, became successful, but more of an avant-garde, edgy, sort of alternative music kind of successful in his day, and never garnered the kind of success. Weird thing is that, you know, at one point in the late 1940s, you have Rodgers and Hammerstein owning Broadway. You go up and down Broadway, you've got your choice. Do you want to go see South Pacific or Oklahoma? You've got nothing but Rodgers and Hammerstein all over the place except for one theater. It's the one that's currently playing Rent nowadays on Broadway. Anyway, or was for a while. I think it may have closed up there. But in any case, there's the Three Penny Opera, just kind of, you know, playing with characters, singing about killers and prostitutes and beggars and that sort of thing on the other side of town, kind of for that one show that has that darker kind of side to it, I guess. Weill is a lot of people's favorite composer now. Almost immediately after he died of a heart attack in 1950, he was immediately sort of revisited by critics, and they were like, wow, this guy really knew what he was doing, and he was a great writer. And he had sadly a rather short life, and he should have given him more credit when credit was available to give him. Weill was married to an actress named Lotte Lenya. She came up through the German cabaret scene and became, even after Weill's death, a real good resource for what he might have done with a song, and also for helping people to find some of his music. She cataloged a lot of his music. She became a very successful actress in her own right. You can see her playing a villain in one of the James Bond films, The Spy Who Loved Me. In fact, one of the characters in one of the Austin Powers films is really a takeoff on Lotte Lenya. And for the most part, most people believe that Kurt Weill was the great unappreciated artist, that he worked with really dark material, but that in some cases wrote such stunning music that he really deserves a second look. And he's kind of a separate entity apart from so many of these other people who wound up working so much with each other, but a significant career nonetheless. A lot of stuff connected to this one, to this module. As I said, you'll get 2 versions of Matt the Knife. You'll probably get the overture to Threepenny Opera and maybe some other stuff. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.